Well, thank you so much for coming and joining us in this afternoon. And this is like right before the whole fair kind of closed up. And I wish we can give you something a little bit different because my colleagues, they are different. They are from these so-called non-for-profit institutions. As you probably know, that Videotage have almost like more than 30 years history in Hong Kong, which is a very important institution that support a lot of video artists and also having a beautiful archive and located in a very particular area at the Qatar Depot. And my other colleague from Nanjing Paik Art Center, which is settled near Seoul, which is also a huge institution, pay a lot of attention on archiving, research, digitalization of our media art hero, Nanjing Paik. Normally we think Nanjing Paik is just a Korean artist, which I do not think so. I think he's much more international and very much engaged with the fluxes, with the whole movement of the 60s and even earlier of our world art, part of the world art heritage, I think. So, and my friend, I don't know how to introduce, yeah, but maybe you should introduce yourself. Yeah, yes.
I think what made me different being here is I actually came from a totally not art background. TBWA is a creative agency network in the world. But the thing is, because now when you do communication, social media is actually at the forefront of that. So we're very, very familiar with the distribution of that and how people actually interact that. And through the exploration purpose, which is originally a commercial purpose, and then we discovered there's a lot more other, a much bigger universe beyond just commercial content. There's a lot of things, lots of contents that, in a way, in so many aspects, is actually art making. Sometimes even before the creator knows. So I think there's a very interesting phenomenon happening there. I guess we can talk a little bit about more later in the sections about that.
Okay, that's very nice. So, but before that, I think probably some of you have been into the theater too and see the program that curated by Isaac and in collaboration with Nanjing Paik Art Center. So I would like to ask you two more. Can you tell us more about this so-called the movement and why you choose those works and to show it to us? Let's start from the phrase 2 to the phrase 1 to the phrase 2.
Okay. Well, I think it's a very interesting screening that we had. This is the first time actually we collaborate with the Nanjing Paik Art Center. And Videotage is like one of the most historical nonprofits in the region. We're celebrating its 32nd anniversary this year. So we actually have one of the most comprehensive video art archive in the region. And when we started our group, actually, we are very much inspired by Nanjing Paik and the whole video art movement. So this is actually a very good opportunity for us to actually, bring in all these work together, and then to also re-examine the history, which I was looking at the program again just now, and I thought it was actually very interesting. There are actually a lot of layers of things that we can explore from the program. Which I think the early works of Hong Kong artists' work are very much, inspired by Nanjing Paik, and they're kind of regenerating a lot of moving image material from the popular culture, from journalism, from a different field, and then transform that into artwork. And I think the new generation is also very interesting in the way that, particularly if we look at the program, I think they have a very much a new language of talking about social issues, politics. It could be actually a lot more subtle, but at the same time, they are kind of growing up from an age which is actually very different from the first generation of Hong Kong artists, or even Namjoon Paik. So, which also goes to actually today's topic, which I think in terms of aesthetics, a lot of like the new generation's work actually they are not exactly the methodology is different from the past, but then the visual language or like the kind of articulation of like all these aesthetics is actually quite you can actually see a lot of connections between the old works and the new works. And also when I was looking at the work, the past work, when we see about like all these social media mature productions and contents, they are also very much inspired by the 80s. So which makes me think about, oh wow, actually a lot of things that actually have the connection and it comes together, and which also bring in a lot of very complex questions to today as well, where institutions like us have been running for many years and going through that kind of like 30 years of history in an age of all these really complex networks. What is the way to go, and how we can actually collaborate with different fields, such as, that's why we also have Zhenhua here, which is going to be actually Namjoon Paik Art Center and TBWA are partners, and of doing entirely different kind of ways of collaboration. So I think, yeah, I look forward to have the conversation with you guys about these complex issues. I'm sure we cannot make a conclusion because everything is so emerging, but I hope this panel would probably bring in some kind of tease out some insights that we can go forward for future collaborations. Sang?
Yes. Before I make a statement or talking about what we have done for the screening programs, let me introduce the Namjoon Paik Art Center shortly. This year is our 10th anniversary. We opened in 2008. We are collecting Namjoon Paik's work as well as contemporary artworks. We are doing exhibitions, outreach programs, archiving, researches, and publications. Many about Namjoon Paik and his legacy in the contemporary art field. Yes, that's pretty much what we are doing now. And for the screening programs, actually, Isaac suggested that we should collaborate to show the video art in terms of the first very early stages of the video art in the 1970s. Late 60s. Also, he would like to show those work with the early video, contemporary video works in terms of how old videos affect contemporary video artists. So actually, we were preparing a little bigger screening programs, but unfortunately, we only select one Namjoon Paik's artwork, which is the very representing and selected work Global Group. It was produced in 1973. It was talking about a more like global Japan. It's like the global communications before the internet age. It was 1973, but Namjoon Paik dreamt that the world could be connected in a more communicative ways using the videos or the video platforms. Instead of using the broadcasting systems, he would like to suggesting and like the forecast that the age would come, everybody has his own broadcasting stations, which is now, right? So he would like to build the communities connecting to each other with using this video. So the global group is very unique and pleasant pieces talking about how we communicate or how the globes could be one altogether. Also, he used a lot of this manipulating the images and used a lot of his contemporary pop musics. So it's more like the music videos in the 1970s. So yes, that was very selected, representing his best work, I think. So we chose it to his collaborations.
But through that old artwork, I see a very brave kind of intuitive way of using the media. And also, I think Nanjun Paik is one of the earliest person who actually think about communication and transformation of the media. And he actually using not only aesthetically by giving us a picture, he's actually think about the challenging system of actually making things possible, which is like he also helped with the Olympic broadcasting scene. So I think then I want to ask you guys what would be like from the first two that you were showing something from like mainland China, the new artist, but do you find this kind of so-called critical moments of actually people using the media, or also from Zhen Chao? What do you think about it? Are people being critical enough by using the social media, and are we, doing something new really?
Well, I think one of the interesting thing is like in the past few years, we have been actually curating a lot of programs by including YouTubers' work and people who are amateur makers. And I think this is something that is very interesting in the way that video art from the beginning was something that is very in the periphery between art and also non-art and popular culture. And a lot of those work were really kind of socially impactful in the way of like, oh, if the mainstream television, they portray certain kind of news, then I would use my camera to actually document the different versions of history, right? So they're actually very disruptive media. And in our program, one thing in the second part of the program, we included, for example, Wang Ping's work. And Wang Ping was originally not really considered himself as an artist at the very beginning. And he was actually already very popular in social media platform of using Facebook, of using Vimeo to distribute his work. And then later on, Videotage and other art institutions and galleries starting to spot, oh wow, this is like a really great talent. So I think like, in nowadays, like we have been really trying to think about like in all these kind of popular culture, are there any people who are actually making similar things that are echoes to the essence of video art, or the synergy that 30 years ago that these artists are really, what are they trying to bring into society? For example, another work that we example was like One Letter Horse. It's a group from Hong Kong. They're fresh graduates a few years ago, and they never study art, but they were very much attracted by using video as a tool to, talk about the paradise, all this kind of news and society. And then what I thought it was very interesting is that like before we included their work in our program, we had a screening at ICA and at Basel in different places. They were already so popular. They got like 7 digits of subscribers, which is a lot more impactful than any art organizations are doing, possibly, right? So we thought about that, and that was something quite interesting in our time. That I think the line between what is art or what is video art or what is not is very blurry, and that we should keep it blurry, because like video art should not be just something that is put in a museum, in a nice TV, where you need to stand in the museum for an hour and just to watch the thing. And at the beginning, video art was something very disruptive of creating a new experience that it should not be only be seen in cinema. It should not be only seen in television. It could be a performance. It could be blah, 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 blah. And so I think like that kind of synergy is very important for me. And particularly in selecting the program, we wanted to showcase some of these kind of examples nowadays.
If I may add to what you're saying, it's interesting that you talk about Wang Ping and One Letter Horse. So many ways, they're obviously art making creators. But if you ask them before their works being actually screened in an art space, I don't think they self-realize they're an artist actually. If you look back to the topic of this panel today, it says basically art making in the era of digital distributions. So it will be very interesting to look at how that distribution platform not only changed the way how you publish your content, it changed how you create the content. It back influenced the productions of video art in so many ways. And on that production process, obviously, you look at who's actually funding that, right? So we're taking YouTube as examples. So there's no one single patron is funding that. It's basically everybody's funding it. It's based on the CPM of the platform. And then, from that perspective, the back influence the cultural formations of the art making. So people get on the platform, maybe the first video they make is just a vlog in their bedroom. They don't even have the faintest idea of what video art is. But there's an evolution process. And then through the explorations, they've seen so many other things on the same platform. They probably didn't even know those are art. They probably, pass by, on the platform, get passed by, some video work from Namjoon Paik. To them, it just looks, from an editing point of view, it's very amazing. And then they explore the tools they have, the apps they have, the editing platform they have. Why don't I imitate that? I want to put some of those into my short film, into my music video, and try to use that manipulation of that media to express what I'm trying to say. And there's so many aspects. If you look at that, that is art making. But they didn't know it until curators bring them into art space. I think that is a very interesting intermediums kind of interactions. But I think what's missing right now is a ecosystem that connect all these dots, really. Because, if you look at YouTube, for example, if I need someone to fund my work, I have to go popular. That's the nature of that, right? That's a little bit not opposite, but that's not usually what artists think when their work are being brought into museum, right? So if someone collects it, that's fine. Then someone's going to fund me to do that. And if I have a collector collect my work, that's even better. But that's not how it works on YouTube. And of course, there's some emerging channels like Kickstarter that have a sub-platform called Drip. You can crowdsource basically funding. You have a collective of patrons to fund your work. So a lot of people are trying to do different things to formulate an ecosystem, but I don't think it's there yet. If I have a more clear ecosystem to connect the production, cultural formations, distributions, and the creator, I think it will be a lot more established than what it is today.
Which is, I think, is interesting you brought up about production. It's not only about distribution. Of course, this week we are in a distribution platform in our Basel. But it actually goes back to a very fundamental question, which I think Namjoon Paik was very innovative by that time, where there was no internet. But he was having a manifesto to think about how he could actually create a new network of production to change the art world, to change the society, democratizing education and democratizing how people connect and to produce, which we had a conversation about. He also had a lab idea.
Yes, when I was at the fair, I thought that artwork could be a little more like private commodities these days, but Namjoon Paik was very against privatizing art. It was his main idea is more like the commons, which is very popular these days, like Airbnbs and using the common platforms, the commons in a common ways. But anyways, so his ideas to use the broadcasting systems, which was very established ecosystems of producing, distributing, and consuming the video content in 1960s and 70s, but Namjoon Paik himself and Fred Basic from WGBH Boston, also Howard Loxton from the WNet 13 in New York. WGBH and WNet also the PBS. It's like the public broadcasting system in the US. So all three got the funded from the Rockefeller Foundation and New York State Council on the Arts, and they created a television laboratory in 1972. So the broadcasting system invited all the artists into the broadcasting systems. The artists used the old facilities provided by the broadcasting systems in 1972. So they created a lot of single-channel videos. From 72 to 74, they opened the artist residency programs as part of the TV Lab. So Ed Wimschiller or the Charlie Clark or Douglas Davis was all the artists who participated in the residence programs. They created very, very interesting and very exciting artworks at their contemporaries. So those artworks could be a little like the starting point. The established social system got attention to what the artworks could work as the social communicating tools. So that was very beginning, and you guys, like the collaboration could be a little more interpreted in a very contemporary way to use the social systems as the communicating tool using the artworks, right?
Yeah, it's one of our ideas was to moving forward is also about production. That in the coming years we are actually planning to create a lab, a content lab, and of course TBWA is one of our partners, and we really want to kind of democratizing video art to the general public, and so the idea was to actually recruit 100 teenagers every year in a lab and provide them educational program, and then to have the co-work space, and then to create content. And also one of the thing is like considering video work in the earlier generation, they're very conscious of creating moving image to create impact to society. So we really want to use this lab idea to actually articulate, connecting these producers and the public, and to encourage these kind of teenagers to use moving image as a way to change people's perceptions about different things. And then by using that kind of production platform, we want to kind of carry forward the legacy of video art that we have. Not only just preserving the archive of the past, but actively, proactively, kind of engaging with the community to create new works. Yeah. Or maybe
it's interesting you talk about the word archive. If you ask people who were born after millennium, it's hard for them to perceive what archive means. Why do you have to archive that? Your kids, exactly. They ask the kids why your Snapchat moment disappear 24 hours later. What if I want to go back and look at that? They wouldn't understand why do I have to go back and look at that? They just don't understand that idea. So
we're talking about like how to preserve the apps, because like 1 year later all these apps is going to be obsolete. Probably.
Exactly. And if the key purpose of the whole program is to create impact to your audience, then it will be a massive difference from what we've been doing back in the 80s and 90s, because back then the screening space is an art space, so people come in, they know why they're here. It's a captive medium, so they come in not to do other things, basically just to watch the video art, right? So if you are to distribute the content alongside with a hell lot of other content on YouTube, including probably next to that is a how-to video, teach you how to cook some quick meals, right? So you're competing with all those things. That is not necessarily art. So your competitions is not another museum or another gallery. Your competition is culture. Everything in the culture is competing that little time from people with other content that they're consuming, right? So you're going to create content that give impact to them, so you have to understand how other content actually giving impact, creating impact to the audience. So it's a very different ball games, and as I say, that distribution platforms are going to change the productions and change how you create the work in the first place.
and hopefully change the art world too.
Well, I think something is interesting there because with Nanjun Paik's work at that time, I think he doesn't imagine himself into the museums. He doesn't even imagine himself by, being archived and distributed today. So I think he was more carrying on with the, like on-time kind of technology. So I think that's something interesting that you guys ever think about that? I mean, by talking about distributing Nanjun Paik or by distributing video art, then my question would be like, why people come to see it? And like with the new media, when you distribute things, and then why people like think that is interesting, because that was a response to what you said before. People being famous on social media and then become included in your program. But then how we bring things vice versa, to another.
Well, this is the beauty of video art, I think. Like the music, it's like the work. Work is the idea, right? And then it could be manifested or expressed in various forms. Like in the analog days, the form is very limited, like the tapes, or the presenting ways is like the screening was the unique and the only way to present, how to present the artworks. But in digital age, as you mentioned, there are a lot of various file formats and presenting ways, like using the platforms on the web or using the white cube screenings. So as an archivist, I would suggest the preserving, archiving is more like the keeping the idea of the artwork. Also, the various manifestation or the expressions could be preserved or deleted forever, but the idea itself could be preserved, and how the institutions or individuals or the platforms could present their idea in which forms. It could be a little bit different ways to understand, to see the video art in the digital age, I think.
Yeah, because for me, the preservation, I have no problem at all. And preservation is one direction, is one beautiful notion of think about the museology issues. But laboratory is another issue. It's like catching on by go toward the future. And Isaac, tell us more.
Well, I think like the problem at stake is that like in the art world, it's like so much institution driven, and institution is controlled by directors and curators, and they have the ultimate authority to select what is to be included as art or good quality of work. But versus like 21st century, it's all about like putting it out there, and then what becomes popular, we don't know. Or there are certain kind of trends that are going towards works that could go, popular, right? It's very contextual. It's changing every day, every second. So I always like put a lot of thoughts about how we can articulate these two things, and obviously we're thinking about that kind of institutional driven kind of approach is really outdated. But at the same time, we cannot discard. We are all practitioners of Curator. First, we have to kill ourselves first. Like the next question is how we can actually articulate these two big paradigms. And for example, last year we in another art fair to talk about video art, and some curators and museum directors were like, that's going to be so dangerous. You think that YouTube could be art, and and blah blah blah, and which I think like we are all finding a way to do that, which I have no quick answer to that yet. But then, we can see actually, I'm not going to say which name, but like there was big institution try to actually collaborate with YouTube and to create a video art platform, but the impact was actually very low. So what is the way to go? How we can actually engage with the general public, or like a lot of really good young people creating contents that are very impactful and intellectually stimulating, but they are also excluded in the art world. Right. So that's, I think, one of the really key question we are dealing with. popularity and selection. Do you have some?
I think I can respond to that with one artist's work, because if you know Mark Lee, he have done several works on this so-called TV bot. So he designed something like software and online catching all these informations and bring them together and making a broadcasting like automatically. And I think this is something really weird, because you know what is an artistic part. But I think that the same question to Nanjing Paik Center, like what is the artistic part?
Well, we're institutions, so I strongly agree with the director that you met the other art fair. Well, the artist part could be the object as the artistic practices remaining as the artwork. Also, his in case of Namjoon Paik, he wrote a lot of essays about what the future would like to be and what this art could affect the society in which ways. So his text could be a little reflection of his little his big artistic ideas. Also, the archives that he left. His Namjoon Paik Art Center has his own studios as titled as memorabilia. The whole New York studio he used as the workspace. We hold the furnitures and the papers inside it, also with the walls. So we all moved to the Yongin, which is near the Seoul. So we reinstalled in our permanent exhibition. So from the memorabilia, the studio collection, we can assume or trace what he have done and what he have thinking as the artist. That could be the artistic part of Namjoon Paik at the context of our art center.
And Nasa, what do you think?
Well, for us, it's like, you know, because we are smaller, we're a lot smaller, so we also have the freedom to actually experiment. And that's actually one of the things that like we really want to keep what we were doing 30 years ago. Because 30 years ago, when all these Hong Kong artists started Videotage, there was no art fair. There was no people know what video art is. And there are really the moment really thinking about like the value of creating video is so important, because that is something they create different narratives, they create a different kind of approach to see the world. And also, I think Namjoon Paik, before his work was being presented at the museum, he also have that kind of value. So for me, I think like sometimes it's not the question of like quality control or blah blah blah, but why don't we create a platform that is about the process? Because we are actually people on behalf of institutions to intervening or mediating the art world, right? So if we could create a powerful platform to, you know, for people to experience that, and that kind of, you know, process could possibly lead to a new discourse, which we don't know yet, right? But what I was thinking is like if we are just as non-profit organization, if we are completely adapting what organization is required by the context or by the world, then we're never able to create something new. So that's actually something I do not have a quick answer to that, but what I am more interested to do is to bring in, for example, people, TBWA or different partners who are from completely different background, and then let's create a platform and see, you know, what we can do, you know. So that's something is actually is more interesting than me, for me. The other thing, I also think that like before we realize that, I think a lot of things that audiences' participation is increasingly important in social media. We have a slide of that glasses in San Francisco. You know, we used to think about found object is, you know, created by artists, but like, you know, that found object of the glasses is, you know, created by an audience. So we also need to think about audience a lot, because they are one of the the biggest stakeholders in that kind of mediation process. For example, I included the slides that the show we did last year, and it was very interesting in the way that some KOL posted the exhibition, and within a day we got 9,000 likes on Instagram, and then we did a focus group after. We see audiences who never go to any art shows, but they came to see the show 4 times, and they start to learn about those art, and then they starting to take pictures and videos of the exhibition and put it on their platform, and starting to write 1,000 words about what they think about the show. I think it's we're in a time that is completely changing. Museum used to be creating docent tour. It's very top down. I teach you A, B, C, D, E, and you have to learn it. You have to remember it. And now, I'm also a professor, and my students doesn't listen to me anymore. They just look at check Facebook for 3 hours just because they want to take attendance. So we're in a very different world. I think audiences are smart enough to become somebody who is contributing to the content. Because once they take a picture and a video and manipulate that from our exhibition and show it on their own platform, it's a process for them to create. And then they are the artists curating their own IG page, basically, right? Everything is curation nowadays. So I think that kind of synergy and mechanism is fascinating for me. That are we more open enough to, accept audience to be changing the concept of artist work, or they creating kind of new meaning to that? And I think that's already happening. It's just that institution is very difficult to change sometimes, and for us I think it's easier because we are tiny organization that we could experiment a lot of things. But I do believe that that's actually the way to go. Yeah.
If I may add to that, it's interesting to talk about what's the artistic value of those contents, how to draw the line between a how to cook a 5 minutes meals video to artwork, right? It looks very far-fetched, but the line is getting blurrier and blurrier now. And if you look back to the 60s, 70s, when video art's just born, it's basically creating a whole new expression on a new medium before other people even understand what it means, right? So to some way, art scene or video artists, they're actually the cultural gatekeeper back then. So at the forefront of that food chain, basically, they influence pop cultures. Andy Warhol factory influenced pop cultures. It's not only creating art, it influenced how music is being produced, what music means, or even. But unfortunately, I have to be very candid, most art institutions and organizations, and now they're not only not being the cultural gatekeeper, they're actually at the back of the food chain. So we're catching up. We're just catching up. So they're catching up what is being new, basically. But just by copying a influencer making makeup video doesn't make it art necessarily. You're just catching up the methodology and the production method. and through the exploration process, we're in hoping, if we can democratize that, we're in hoping they can find new way to manipulate that platform. So that, I think, to me, that is the artistic value of that. And I think it's yet to be defined right now.
I also always ask the question, some students I always ask us, what does that video mean? And I would tell them, well, you subscribe to that IG account that that person is just smashing an orange every day. What does that mean? Why do you subscribe that? Because sometimes it's just I think there's a lot of things that we think about, moving image, how it is being produced, and in different paradigm, are we being stuck in certain kind of discourses or rhetorics of language that we can actually democratize it? I don't know. I'm not saying that IG person creating smashing the orange is the best piece of art, but I do think that there is something that we can also learn from. Right, and that action actually echoes to a lot of early video art, where why these artists are doing these things.
It's a huge genre there, just crushing object on all social media platform. Basically, you check hashtag slow crush. There's more than 2 million of those. It's smashing cake and phone and all this kind of thing. And if you look at what Gary Hill did at the very beginning, 1 hour's video just looking at manipulation of forms, moving sands, and all that. A lot of video creators on different platforms, they're making those ASMR video, which is made to stimulate your senses using moving images and audio, right? But I don't think they understand their artists just yet. But in so many, they're more innovative than a lot of people doing more traditional video art.
Yes, surprisingly, I was a little surprised that Ajang mentioned the audience issues. In 1963, Namjoon Paik held his first solo exhibition in Germany. One of the pieces that was presented at the exhibition was a television experiment. The television set was on, and the broadcasting images from the German broadcasting system was on the televisions, and the audiences put some foot switches on the floor, and they got created some electric signals to the monitors. So the monitor images are a little bit distorted using from the other external signals from other than the signals transmitted from the broadcasting systems. So that was his first art television works. He would try to making a improvised images with the help of the audience. Also, Namjoon Paik mentioned that his participation television was very, very masterpiece in terms of participation. The television artwork is making the creator, which is the artist, and the audiences, also the critics. Those three parties all together came into one figure to make a artistic value in creating the artistic objects, like the making the improvised images. So his idea in 1963 can be manifested in this 21st century in terms of crushing the oranges on the platforms, right?
But I see the value also have a very beautiful critical value, because it's not only by using the media, creating artwork and put it up, it's actually questioning on the media itself. So that's why I think is very important of Namjoon Paik's work from the early time, but which I also saw from the early 90s in Hong Kong artists' way of using it. Like, for example, Danny Yun and Alan Powell. And I do think, they are aware of, what video can do and what image means. Yeah.
Just like the karaoke work that I watched it over and over again, and I thought that was fascinating. And that actually echoes to the media itself, that people love karaoke, and let's take that element and reshuffle it and then create a meaning. Yeah. Do we have a Q&A?
Yeah, I think we should now open to the public. Yeah. And if anybody have any questions to one of us, please.
Hi, I have a question to you, because you have a background of social media. And in my mind, the social media play the role to entertain the mass market. But the artists don't do that way. So how these two territory combine together and to make sure create a very new and a very pioneering art to the audience?
Well, I think what you said about the purpose of social media, I think is yet to be established. If you look at one of those most popular social media platforms today, YouTube, let's say, when it was invented, I don't think before Google even bought them, I don't think they intended to entertain people. They were just thinking of a new way to distribute content, democratize content distributions. And then I think it's around the time of 2007 or 6, something like that. And then the first viral video came. And the one who created that, which is basically a footage shot by iPhone in a zoo, and an elephant came to them, and then a family got scared and run away. It looks very funny, and it gone viral. And suddenly, there's a vocabulary called viral video, and then it's an evolution process that they reshape the platform. And now, if you look at the genre of the content on YouTube and how people consume it, it's a lot more than just entertainment. Of course, a large chunk of it is entertainment. A lot of people just get into to get satisfied. They look at children playing slime for 30 minutes and sculpting in different form. So it's a combination of sculpture and video art, and distribute to the audience who is not conscious that it's actually consuming art, right? So in so many ways, like what you say, audience participation is always part of the art making. They thought there's a medium, there's an audience, they're separate entity, but that's never true. And on social media, it's even more so. And I'm talking about not only the direct consumptions, I'm talking about the indirect consumption. For example, how social media manipulate data, unfortunately. So what you have seen in other platforms, what apps you use, what your interests point on content consumption, influence what is being served to you, right? So that is part of the audience consumption that shapes the canvas of how you can draw and what you can paint on it, right? So going back to your questions, and I don't believe the purpose of the media platform define whether or not it's art, because the platform is neutral. You can put other thing on it, and you can define how it's being consumed as a creator.
Out of time?
No.
Okay, great. So since we've been talking about this social media platform, and I got a question because, Instagram and Facebook, they are making storylines, and they are planning to make TV programs on these contents. So do you think this is gonna be a threat to the traditional script-oriented platforms like Big Six or Netflix, something like that? I'm not in recent because these improvisational video is still very rejuvenate, but in a long term.
I'm trying to figure out how to connect that questions back to what we discussed before. So if I understand correctly, you're saying is free online streaming platform a threat to paid video content consumption platform like Netflix? I think in a way it's actually the other way around. To your question specifically, I think Netflix is more the threat to YouTube in so many ways. And people, if you look at the past few years, creators are moving away from YouTube because Google didn't even realize that in order to keep the creators there, you have to pay them enough, right? But Google doesn't pay them directly. It's the audience who paid them. So you have to make sure there's enough interesting content there to fund their platform so creators are being funded. And Netflix is a totally different kind of business model. Well, the business model basically is they gather the money from Wall Street and then fund the content creator to produce very expensive content, and then they get a subscription fee, right? So that's a big threat to YouTube, and then YouTube actually tried to copy them, and they actually opened a premium subscription platform called YouTube Red, Never Fly. So they are still learning, even. So between platform and platform, I don't think, even if you look at past 10 years since social media was born, I don't think anyone has an idea what's the best business model. And unfortunately, our scene is not even part of that conversation. Now we are catching up, and we have to catch up real fast in order to retain our position we used to be as a cultural gatekeeper, I guess, right?
So you have been talking about the different players, like you say. Now this is a different round, not maybe a bit different than the art fair beside us. You have also talked about institutions who might be a bit too authoritative as far as judgment is concerned. But how do you see quality? Who is who is talking and defining quality, or do you still want to talk about art? Or, I mean, there seems to be like an idea that it has to go different ways, but what is that? I would be interested to hear. Actually, the three of us, the three of you, it concerns. So,
yeah, there was a question that like we don't have a definite answer for that. But I think like we can never actually compete with like what the world is doing outside, at Basel. We are actually trying to, as on behalf of, art organizations, we're trying to, connect to the world, and then also trying to, include, what is going on out there in our world. So I think like for, as a person, on behalf of art organizations, what I think our aim is to really we are still an art organization defining what is quality. Otherwise, we will be YouTube, right? So I don't worry that a day that we will be completely not selecting any works or involving in any selection process, because any institutions are actually going through that inclusion and exclusion process. But what I mean is to actually, we should be more open up ourselves to think about what is the potential future ways of including things that are outside our world. Because right now, for example, video art, if you will, is compared to 30 years ago or 40 years ago, is a lot more legitimized as a product or as something that is, put in a white cube space. But originally, it wasn't that. I always think about video art exhibition, how we can actually do better. For example, I saw a lot of especially historical video art exhibition that include more than 50 big names, video artists in the world. But if you think about the exhibition setup, how can audience actually see those work if they spend, from 9 to 6 p.m. whole day at the museum for the whole month? They're still not able to see the work completely. I mean, there's something wrong about that, and it's because it's increasingly framed by institutional practice. And so what we can do is we are not, having a manifesto to change the world, but at least I think art practitioners should have the synergy to disrupt the model, what is going on right now, to destabilize it, and to be a lot more, kind of engaging in terms of, what is outside our world. Yeah.
Well, that's a tough question. I think the video medium is very useful to deliver messages on social political context other than compared to other artistic mediums such as paintings or the sculptures, because video has narrative plot as the stories, where video has a lot of informations like the audio visuals. It's not only the visuals with the sound. So the video medium can play as a metaphor for some artists to say about how the social issues could be interpreted as the artworks. Also, those these unique characteristics of a video can be selected by the museums. It's about the power issues. Who would select which pieces, right? But in this digital distribution age, the young video artists are using various context, various languages to express what they are thinking, such as the games or the web content. So those whole new languages for them to represent how they are thinking, it could be a little combined in some topic issues or the theories that the curator would like to express. In context of the institutional wide, it could be interpreted as the power issues, but also it could be interpreted as a curatorial issues. So any curators has very intentions or the curating intentions to express his or her stories, how to tell the society or the artist could be interpreted in which ways. So in selecting the artworks and to making the curatorial issues, it's all up to their decisions or at the institution levels. So, but back to the beginning, I think the video medium has itself very wide potential to express what artists would like to say or what the curators would like to say in terms of the exhibitions. So in selecting the video medium, it could be a little like the future wide, I think.
I think if I may, okay, if I may, I think what you and you're trying to say is basically what makes it arts basically lies in the authority of the curation process, basically, right? But it have to be very candid. Art institution wouldn't like to hear that. Art organization wouldn't like to hear that. As a curator, of course, you will curate what's being presented in your channel, for example, in your own platform. That platform could be a museum space, could be your YouTube channel, could be your IG channel. But you know, a key influencers who have 1 million followers, if you go to your exhibitions, you have 1,000 artworks there, they only pick 3 and then reblock it. That is a curation process. And then he or she, that influencer, is already authorized by people as is bigger than the institution who tell me what this art was not. So in so many ways, that influencer is a curator more than you are. So I don't have an answer to that questions like they do, but I think that is reality that we have to embrace, and we have to find where the authority comes from. So you can't, power can be seized, but authority has to be earned. So if you understand more how to play on those platforms, there's a higher chance you can, regain your authority.
Curators also would change, I think, like because there's an increasingly much bigger impact from the audiences.
Hi, can you? It looks like you guys do a dance between curation, being the artist, and then maybe running a space or a mini institution or becoming bigger institutions. Can you walk me through that dance? I mean, that's hard to play those roles, it's but it's for, especially in video art, it seems like it's really important because you're the harbinger, right? You creating the institution behind you, but also you're creating the art, and you want other people to do similar things. So you're, the same way 100 years ago people created art schools of art, right? So could you walk me through what that's like? And the schizophrenia of being those 3?
Just don't sleep. Replying email at 4 a.m. I don't know. It's a very big question, but I don't know. Like I think one of the things that I feel like happy about is like to still have that kind of energy to see the potentials. Where I think Zhenhua in the introduction introducing Videotage, and we actually like a few years ago we also have a big discussion about like whether the organization has already fulfilled its legacy, because video art, it seems like so outdated already. So to be able to imagine there are actually new paths that we could potentially create is something that is like very meaningful. Just like I just want to repeat again that like 30 years ago, our founders actually they didn't know. They're actually thinking about the same thing, even though despite by that time there are no YouTube. They're using different terminologies. They're also fighting for funding, fighting for audiences, fighting for reclaiming a ground for certain kind of practices. but that is something that is so valuable, and we want to keep it, and that matters, I think. Yeah. I'm not sure if I'm answering your question.
I try to give you a little, or share with you with a little what I feel with your question. And I think why we're having Videotage and Nanjing Paik Art Center and Zhenhua here, I think we have to see them in different time and different layers of our artistic creation in the last 50 years. And I think that's a different stage of actually what we have to critically think about and also do it critically. Like when Nanjing Paik did the work in the 60s, I'm sure he cannot imagine like with what I said, about whatever the institution would be in the future. But I think nowadays, like what Isaac and Zhenhua try to do is like to set up something even further, like to create something new and something like currently critical to our time. So this is something, of course, I don't think anybody could answer. But that's also reflect on the curatorial position, because it is something very critical that you have to think about. Curator or being a person working in the art is not a stable role. It's always changing, especially in the contemporary time. And if you don't think about it, you're also gonna lose your position very soon. Yeah.
It's just like echoes to Zhenhua is making a new film, so he's also like very, very complex. Like we're all like kind of people who wear multiple hats. I think that's what we do. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Isaac. Thank you, Zhenhua. Thank you. And yeah. Thank you. Thank you.